Okay, I'm back. I had a little interruption. My little baby downstairs was crying. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Ashtanga yoga. Hatha yoga takes the approach of focusing on disciplining the body and the energy in the body in order to create a clear mind. And there are 5 main, they call them energetic manipulations in this practice. There's asana, there's pranayama, 2 things that are inspired by Ashtanga yoga, and there are a few others that we'll discuss. So, and again, these are Ashtanga and Hatha are the 2 major types of yoga that are used in most modern yoga practices. And then there are other types of yoga that are like just completely different. So Bhakti yoga is discipline of emotions. So you'll notice that while yoga means union, generally the techniques used in yoga are some sort of discipline, some sort of practice that requires focus in order to achieve a goal. So in Bhakti yoga, the goal is devotion to God or to a higher consciousness. They call it the easiest and most powerful yoga. So some sort of devotion. That's Bhakti yoga. Karma yoga, which, again, karma is like a popular word. Karma means action. So karma yoga is the yoga of selflessness. So you're doing some sort of work that is, you're not doing it in order to receive praise. You're not doing it in order for it to bear fruit for you. You're serving the world, serving someone else, doing some sort of service. And this is described in the Bhagavad Gita. It's work that brings peace and joy. Work for others that brings you peace and joy. Jnana yoga, there are different ways of spelling this. I'm not sure which is the correct. And you'll find if you just take to Google, yoga poses, types of yoga, it's a big scramble because there's so many schools and there are so many translations. There are many different definitions for various things. So good thing you're in a yoga course and you have a place to ask questions if you'd like to make sense of anything. Feel free to send me a course message. That's always a good place to start. And if you just want to discuss things, we have the discussion board there for some rich class discussions. Okay, so Jnana yoga is the discipline of intellect and wisdom. So it's like studious yoga. So when I was learning at the ashram, they said being a student is a form of Jnana yoga. So you're valuing your education. And the goal here is awareness of truth. So awareness of like cosmic truth, like really seeking truth in this type of yoga. Mantra yoga is chanting and singing. So you may have heard of the concept of mantras, like repeating a mantra, a phrase, or something that is important to you. Well, in yoga, there are mantras that people chant. There's generally some sort of melody that they chant them to. I learned several, like a handful. There are many that exist. I'm not really doing that in this class, I don't think. If there's interest, though, please ask, because I don't mind making a couple of videos of some chanting, if that's interesting to you. I was thinking about saving that for more of an advanced yoga course, but ask if you're interested. I can make some videos of that. Interestingly, so you can perform mantra yoga by chanting out loud, singing, or by whispering, or by actually chanting mentally. And I was told that doing it mentally, well, it's more challenging because you don't have that physical output of like moving your mouth and creating sound. So you have to stay focused in your mind. And therefore, they say that that's the most powerful form of chanting. It just requires so much more concentration. And I found this interesting that while you're chanting, the focus is on, and I had learned, focusing on an intention, like the intention of the chant. Sometimes there are chants I learned one for creativity, for releasing anxieties, and for good health. So you can focus on the intention. You can also focus with your eyes open on an image called a yantra. And there's a yantra created to go with many of the mantras. And if I find some good examples, well, there are many examples I can put up for you. If you're interested, you can also let me know. Another focus that you can have is, which I didn't know, I wasn't told this, but I thought this was very interesting. You can chant while imagining and focusing on the stars, or on like higher consciousness or the divine or God or whatever. And this might be a good time to point out that yoga is not a religion. It's spiritual. It encourages you to connect with yourself, but it's not a religion. And I think that's important to note. And they said this at the ashram too, you know. A lot of Hindu people practice yoga, but it's not a religion itself. Yoga is considered a science, which some people may argue also, but basically it's a way of harnessing and manipulating your energy to your benefit and to the benefit of those around you. So it's considered a science. Things like chanting, you know, make people start to question, like, okay, I'm learning a different language and they're using like these gods in the chants sometimes. And so like, am I practicing another religion? So that's where sometimes it gets questionable. But the practice of yoga, you know, the physical postures, the breathing techniques, the meditations, those are ways of kind of harnessing your own internal potential, or, you know, by controlling your mind and controlling, as you see here, emotions, actions, etc., in order to have a more peaceful and productive life. So it's separate from religion. And actually there's, I'm thinking of a video that was created by one of my teachers that I can share on that topic if people may be interested. Especially, you know, like, for example, there'll always be like the family member or the friend who is hesitant about yoga because of that. So it's an important point. There's, you know, some teachers will have a sort of extremely spiritual slant. So if you're not comfortable with that, you can always find a different class to take. I'll note that I'm not approaching this from like any sort of religious standpoint or overly spiritual standpoint. I'll be teaching you yoga, the science of yoga. Okay, so there's two more types I'll present, and there are other types of yoga as well. Swara yoga is a really interesting concept. It utilizes the breath to bring balance. And we'll talk a little bit about this when we get into the pranayama part of the class. And I have like a whole book here that I love to get into. But I did learn a little bit in person when I was at the ashram. So basically, like, you're manipulating which side of your nose you're breathing out of in order to manipulate your energy channels. So like, for example, if you hold your finger under your nose, you can feel like which nostril is breathing more prominently. And that's associated with a certain side of the brain that's more active and a certain energy channel that's more active. And so there are all these techniques that you can use to actually manipulate the stream of air in order to manipulate your energy to serve you best in different situations, such as if you have to be more analytical or more creative, you can personally manipulate your energy flow to facilitate that. Or like certain seasons of the year, certain phases of the moon, all kinds of things. That in itself is its own science, its own form of yoga. And it's like very specific and very involved. It's really interesting. Perhaps like it is a whole other form of yoga. But I'll get a little bit more into it later this semester. And then there's Kundalini yoga, which you may have heard of. I think it was popular, maybe like 70s or 80s or so, like had a very popular phase. It's the science of psychic awakening. So it involves directing energy to your chakras, different chakras, or centers in your body. So I think I have a figure in here of the chakras if you're not aware of them. There are different like places in your body that focus energy. And you'll focus your energy to the first 6 chakras in order to activate the higher chakras or like psychic energy. I don't really practice Kundalini yoga, so that's about as much as I can say about it. But that's another kind of like popular modern, actually practiced one that also involves asana and pranayama and chanting. So it's a little similar to Ashtanga and Hatha in that sense. Okay. So I'll show you a little bit more about Ashtanga and Hatha, since those are the main forms of yoga that comprise the modern yoga practice. Ashtanga yoga, again, based on the discipline of the mind, began like 5000 BC. And of course, I think that's estimated, but a very long time ago. And these are the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga. I've seen different presentations of these limbs, sometimes like in a circle or sometimes growing out of a tree. But I chose this one because I think it's important to follow in order. Because, you have to have a concept of the basics before proceeding to these next levels. So when we start Ashtanga yoga, you start with we aren't going over this too much in our class, but I'll introduce them now. We start with the basic morals that are introduced. So non-violence, non-lying, stealing, greed, brahmacharya, don't waste vital energies. You can read more about that if you like. And then there's the niyamas, how you treat yourself. So purity, content, self-study, discipline, and surrender. A big part of this is purity, which these are all important, but we learned a lot about cleansing techniques at the ashram. So if you've heard of neti pot, where you pour clean salt water. It has to be clean. Don't use tap water. Clean. You boil water first and add a certain amount of salt to it. Let it cool down. Then you can use neti pot, pouring between 2 nostrils. I am not going to be teaching you like those kind of invasive cleansing techniques in this online course because I'm not there to supervise you. But there are a lot of really interesting ones. Really kind of almost abstract, interesting ones. And when I was there learning them, a major point that was made is like they challenge your comfort with your own body and the functions that it can do. Like for the simplest example, neti pot, okay, so there is a connection between one nostril and the other somewhere inside of your head. And like we're going to witness that by pouring water in one nostril and watching it come out the other. And some people are like very uncomfortable with that. And so practicing that as a yoga practice, again, like challenges the mind, encourages you to make peace in any situation, which is a main goal of yoga, like peace throughout any circumstance. And then also makes your mind and your body in tune with one another. It's an interesting type of practice, these cleansing techniques. And as a result, also it's cleansing your body in preparation for these yoga practices and for an improved, lifestyle. And then the next step is asana. So that's the most popularly practiced limb of yoga. So you go to a yoga class, usually they'll just be getting right to the asanas. They'll be showing you poses and you'll be copying them. Depending where you take your class, you may understand what you're doing and why, or you may not, and then you may go home. That's kind of an unfortunate thing about a lot of yoga classes today. But asana is a major component of a lot of Western yoga classes. And that is why yoga is often confused for exercise. It's not designed as an exercise. It is active, but it's meant to be, there's a phrase, Siram Sukham Asana, and I might be pronouncing that wrong, but it means steady, comfortable position. So you want to be steady and you want to be comfortable in your various yoga poses. And if you're not, you should adjust it because it's meant to be a steady and comfortable posture that, slightly challenges your mind. Like, okay, I'm in an awkward position, but then the practice is to make peace with it. And again, like find peace and comfort and balance in any circumstance is a challenge in yoga. And that's what we're teaching ourselves. Then there's the breath. So pranayama is the control of the breath. So there are many practices that we'll learn, such as deep breathing, slow breathing, practices that can be used to calm you down, cool you down, warm you up, focus yourself, bring yourself balance. These practices can be very powerful. And so, pay attention when I'm teaching you the online instruction. In India, I found it really interesting when talking to the general population of people that you would meet. It was more common that someone had a regular pranayama practice than a regular asana practice, which I would say is different in the US. Usually they will have had experience with asana, but maybe haven't heard of pranayama. So it hasn't become so popular here yet. Pratyahara is the next, which is sense withdrawal. So you're moving more internal. Your focus is becoming more on the deeper self. So you're not responding to your five senses, you're focusing internally. And we'll be practicing Yoga Nidra at the end of the semester, which is a form of pratyahara, sense withdrawal, where we allow those external stimuli to fall away and we focus on the kind of the internal journey. And then there is focus and meditation. So dharana and dhyana, these are both, getting into meditation. There's a distinction though, which is most people who practice yoga will kind of make it to this level of being able to focus on a certain object or focus the mind on a certain like guided path or intentional type of meditation. But this next level of meditation, like true meditation, I was taught is mostly usually reached by those who like devote their life to yoga. So, the extreme version would be like a sadhu living in a cave somewhere, meditating all the time. So dharana is more the kind of like accessible level of meditation that many of us do. And then dhyana is more high level meditation. And samadhi is like joining with universal consciousness. So this is something that the greatest swamis in yoga may reach, like the concept of it is, instead of dying, like they leave their body behind and they choose to go join with the universal consciousness that may exist. So that's the concept of samadhi. An interesting story is when I was at the ashram, the major guru of that ashram, Swami Satyananda Saraswati, who created Yoga Nidra and who wrote a lot of the books for the Bihar School of Yoga, he took samadhi while I was there. I mean, I didn't meet him. I wasn't like with him, but he took samadhi in a different town when I was at the ashram. And because he had done that, they had the celebration of his life at the ashram I was at. So like hundreds of people from far and wide came to visit and celebrate his life. I happened to have a fever, and so I was in my room at the time just listening to everything happening. But it was really interesting because he taught the practice of Yoga Nidra, where you lie quietly and like listen. You use your sense of hearing only and you let your other senses fall away. So I was kind of in a state of Yoga Nidra, like experiencing the celebration of life for the teacher of Yoga Nidra. It was an interesting connection that I feel that I have towards that, which is one of the reasons why I'm researching it in my clinical research currently. Okay, anyway. Oops, sorry. So I circled this because the first 6 layers are generally what is most accessible to the average person practicing yoga. And by practicing these layers of yoga, you can improve your life and make your life easier, more peaceful, and more balanced. And that's kind of like a realistic concept of why we practice yoga. Okay, so that's Ashtanga yoga. And then there's Hatha yoga. So again, this version of yoga disciplines the body and the energy in an effort to unite the mind and body and balance the nervous system. This was created, far after Ashtanga. So Ashtanga was like 5,000 years BC. This was more like, similar amount of time AD. So it adopts some of the same practices from Ashtanga yoga, but it has a little bit of a different intention. So Hatha, Ha means the Pingala Nadi. So Pingala means sun and Nadi is the energy passage. And Tha means the, I didn't edit that. Ida, it should say Ida, meaning moon. I'll edit that in the slides when I upload them. And this goes along with the left side of the body. So the sun represents male energy, the right side of the body. And the Ida represents the moon, the left side of the body, and female energy. And in Hatha yoga, so they say they cleanse these 2 energy channels using some of those cleansing techniques and the yoga practices that we do, and we unite them. So we're uniting the mind and the body. We're uniting the left and right sides of the body, and also our nervous system. So the moon, the left nostril, the female energy, that's like, I guess you can think of like the moon is like sleepy, you know, so represents the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the rest and digest mode. And then the right side of the body, or the male energy, the sun energy, represents more activity, so the sympathetic nervous system. So in yoga, we're balancing sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems so that they can work together. And then, you know, like they say we're uniting them, the left and the right side, to meet in the middle. And we can imagine that at the eyebrow center, which is a chakra called the Ajna chakra. So in Hatha Yoga, the practice of Hatha Yoga stimulates the chakras, although like Kundalini Yoga focuses on the chakras a lot. Hatha Yoga, at least in my experience, we don't talk too much about the chakras, but just a note there that we're stimulating all of those chakras in order, you know, to have our energy meet at the higher chakras. You can tell I don't know as much about the chakras, so we can have like a kind of low-level discussion about that if you want, but that's about it. And I could direct you to a Kundalini yoga teacher if you're very interested in those, and if you have more questions, you can let me know, because I could refer you to somebody to talk to. Okay, so Hatha Yoga involves 5 manipulations of prana. So basically, and you can see some similarities to Ashtanga Yoga and the 8 limbs. So there are Shatkarmas, there's 6 of them, cleansing techniques. And generally, there are some breathing techniques used to cleanse the body. There are some meditation techniques. And then there are some techniques using water, like I was mentioning, Neti Pot. And this is an active link. If you click on it, it'll bring you to the page hosted by the ashram I studied at that shows you some of these cleansing techniques. And I'll show you some of them as we go out throughout the semester. Secondly, there's asana. So these steady, comfortable positions. I say in the West, we know this is doing yoga. And then pranayama. So again, breath control. So these things are similar to Ashtanga Yoga. And then Hatha Yoga adds in energy locks and mudras. So energy locks, there are 3 of them. I will probably teach you some of them when we get into pranayama. So energy locks, you can lock at your chin or at your abdomen or in your pelvic floor. And this is important whenever you're doing any breath holding. So in pranayama, sometimes there are moments where you want to hold your breath for some certain number of counts. And in order to protect your digestive system and protect your organs, you want to lock your air at your chin and your abdomen or in your pelvic floor, depending on what you're doing. So that's like a brief introduction to bandhas. And then there's mudras. So there are gestures that you can do with your body or with your hands that help to increase concentration, help you reach meditative states. And here's a link to several of the mudras that people do. You might have seen or heard of the pose Viparit Karni, where you lay on the ground with your legs up against the wall. That's considered a mudra. Another mudra is the act of like gazing, closing your eyes and imagining that you're gazing through your eyebrow center. So there are several hand mudras you've probably seen, like Dhyan Mudra, that people do while they're meditating. Touching your 2 fingers together is used to increase concentration. And then there are several others. Okay, so that's like a general introduction. What is yoga? What are the types of yoga? What is Ashtanga? What is Hatha? And we'll be experiencing this in the course. So like I said, we'll be focusing on this Ashtanga and Hatha, these Ashtanga and Hatha practices. And in our course, the first 5 weeks we'll be doing asana, so the physical postures. Then we'll be spending 5 weeks on breathing techniques. After that, I'll teach you some chantings, Omkar, which is just chanting Om. If anyone's interested in other mantras, just ask me. I can show you some. And then, I point out, I'll be going a little bit over Swara Yoga during the pranayama unit. So these are again, focusing on the types of yoga: Ashtanga, Hatha, Mantra, and Swara. Those are all different types of yoga. Combined into our yoga practice, and mantra and swara kind of appear in Hatha and Ashtanga. They share certain practices amongst the yoga practices. And of course, we'll be doing some meditation at the end also, and that falls under the category of Ashtanga or Hatha yoga. Okay, so modern day, who is practicing yoga and why are they practicing? So yoga has become increasingly popular in recent decades. These are surveys done by, they're national health surveys reported by the National Center of Complementary and Integrative Health. You can see, so they're showing various complementary and integrative health techniques here. You can see yoga is like the most popular one as of 2012 here. It just like skyrocketed in use, but it was still only like 9.5% of adults, which I think is kind of low, but actually compared to other things, that's a lot of people practicing, like almost 1 in 10. And then by 2017, that number of people practicing, the percentage of people practicing increased a lot. It increased up to 14.5% about. And this graph also shows increase in meditation and a slight increase in the number of people going to a chiropractor, which is also considered a complementary approach to health. So why are people practicing? Over 90% of people practicing yoga report that they're doing it for general wellness, whereas more like 15% say that they're doing it specifically to treat a health condition. Okay, so I wanted to show these figures as well from those same papers, which shows some of the effects that yoga is having on people as they report it. Like they're saying, this is what I've observed. So, and I'd like to point out that yoga, this middle bar on all these graphs, is higher than the other bars. So yoga seems to be having a stronger effect than natural products or chiropractic on these various outcomes. So behavioral outcomes include exercising more and eating healthier as a result of doing yoga, cutting back or stopping using alcohol and cigarettes as a result of doing yoga. So I've heard it described, the effect of yoga as you're more in tune with yourself, and so you know what your body needs and wants, and you're more likely to make good choices. Because hopefully by practicing yoga and being very present in the practices that you're doing, because they're hard, because doing yoga pose is hard, you have to be very focused. It teaches you to be more focused and more present throughout every moment of your day. And when you're paying attention to how your mind is doing, how your body's doing, how are your emotions doing, you're more likely to make choices that are for the better of those things. So you're more likely to say, I feel like I need to go for a walk. I feel like I need to eat an apple, whatever. You make some good choices because you're more in tune with your body. Other wellness-related outcomes reported from doing yoga: reduced stress, improved sleep, feeling better emotionally, coping with health problems, and improved overall health. Okay, benefits of yoga. And these are general. Just as a starting point, I'll be talking about the more specific benefits of each pose according to the yogic tradition as we go, and of each breathing technique and whatever. But, traditional descriptions of yoga, there are so many benefits. And as a broad view, benefits of yoga include mental clarity, balance in general, peace, ultimately enlightenment, for advanced practitioners, not necessarily for all of us. Better physical health, decreased stress and anxiety, improved sleep, and many more things. And then there's been clinical research done on yoga. I feel like clinical research on yoga probably started probably about the 70s or so, because there's some early studies on meditation. But I put some important studies here, but there are so many, and I'll be adding them to a folder in our Brightspace page. One of my research mentors did a big study on yoga for low back pain that got a lot of attention. I posted a study, an efficacy study on anxiety. So that means they're showing that yoga, as compared to a popular psychiatry intervention, cognitive behavioral therapy, it can benefit generalized anxiety disorder. And then this is a review paper done in 2020 on yoga studies for anxiety, stress, depression, hypertension, pain, and many more things. You can see all the ways that yoga is being applied. And just because I'm your teacher and I'm doing yoga research too, I want to share my work. So I've studied pranayama and heart rate variability in the context of hypertension as well as Yoga Nidra, which is a guided meditation for insomnia and also for anxiety. So there's some links there if you want to explore those papers. Okay, so are you ready to learn yoga? I hope so. This is, again, I've said this, but each week I'll post a video. I'll demonstrate and explain. I'll put some slides to give more detail, share any research. Next week we'll start with asana. Like I said, here's kind of what you should expect: asana, pranayama, omkar chanting, meditation, and we do have a final. I don't expect anything hard. It's just, overall, concepts. And then each week, you're just to check for comprehension and to see how you're doing with these exercises, since it's not an in-person course. Exercises, like practices, not trying to call it an exercise. I'll have you do a short quiz checking for comprehension, and then I'd also like you to submit a picture or a video of yourself doing whatever practice it is that we're doing that week. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, but if you could pick especially any part of it that you would like some guidance on, or maybe you did something cool and you're proud of it, send me that too. I'd like to give you some feedback or encouragement or, whatever it is. So just a way for me to see that you're doing what it is that I'm teaching and to check that you're doing it correctly. Because doing it correctly is important so that you can get the benefits and also not, you don't do something correctly. You don't want to hurt yourself either. Not to scare you, but anyway. So that is what we're planning to do. And we have a discussion board open for this week also. I think there are 2 links. One is introduce yourself. So I like to know who you are, why you're taking yoga, introduce yourself to your class. And then the second one is just called discussion board 1. All of these are open topics. So just, you can put something there like a question or an inspiration, conversation starter. That's how we'll do the discussion boards. And I'd like you to post something and comment on someone else's post. I won't be commenting on everybody's or reading everybody's. It's more for you, but I'll be giving you a participation grade based on your involvement. And here and there, I'll be kind of spot checking, commenting on a few of them and seeing what you're talking about. So, all right, well, that's it. Stop the recording and have a good week.